Welcome back to the safety behaviors module. So today we're looking at how to reduce safety behaviors through something called habituation. So we'll go through a bit of a review of what we previously covered, how to do habituation and practice. So we've already looked at what safety behaviors are. They're things we do to either control anxiety or try to keep ourselves safe. And the previous module looked at beginning to change these through something called behavioral experiments. Now that is one way to begin to reduce our safety behaviors and retrain our nervous system into feeling safe in social situations and growing our confidence. But the other way is something called exposure and habituation. So when would we use one or the other? Well, behavioral experiments are really, really good for dropping safety behaviors, which we've already looked at. Exposure and habituation are a little bit better for when you're totally avoiding something, so completely physically avoiding a situation. I've divided these up to make them easy to understand for the course, but in reality, in therapy, by doing behavioral experiments, you are also increasing your exposure to things, and by doing exposure, you may inadvertently be performing a behavioral experiment. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to do the right one when, but just you may find that habituation is much more of an easier starting point when it comes for totally avoiding things, which often doesn't feel like a safety behavior you can just drop very easily in some situations. So what is habituation? Well, habituation is the process of us or animals becoming used to something so that we no longer think of it as unpleasant or annoying, or importantly, think about it as a threat. Now, this is quite important because we may not even think that it's a threat outside of the moment, but once we're in the moment, it is feeling threatening. It is causing anxiety. Thinking about where might be good for you to start with habituation, it's probably good to identify an avoided situation for your list of safety behaviors to begin to challenge. Now, unlike the previous behavioral experiments, we might not just be going into it and dropping all of our safety behaviors. We want to take it a little bit more gradually because that's how we habituate our nervous system to feeling safe in these situations. So rather than going straight in at the deep end, we're breaking it down into these 4 steps, and particularly step 3. We want small, manageable reductions rather than going into the end goal situation, which is in this situation, presenting to the whole company. So here's an example. If presenting to the whole company is an 8 out of 10 anxiety level, that's quite high, and it makes total sense why I'm avoiding it. So I need to break it down a little bit. So presenting to colleagues is an 8 out of 10 as well, but presenting to 3 friends is 6, and presenting to my partner is 3. So what we want to begin to do is work through building up, habituating ourselves in each of these situations until we begin to feel safe in them and our anxiety level comes down, and then we can move on to the next step. Now, I know it sounds awful, but hold in mind our graph, which was also in the previous modules, that every time we avoid something, we are only getting temporary anxiety relief and building anxiety higher in the long term. With habituation, we begin to nip this in the bud and actually rewire our anxiety response so that it comes down completely, so that it's not actually activating in the first place. On this side of the equation, we're on the harder side because we're still feeling the anxiety and we're going to have to habituate ourselves. But hold in mind that this graph on the right is possible if you begin to do this. So use the worksheet below the lesson to choose one avoided situation. It talks about how to set up your own habituation, how to rate your anxiety before, during, and after, and when to move on to the next step. And then create your own plan and commit to following the steps. You may find that you need to repeat a week twice or repeat a step twice because your anxiety isn't coming down to the level you want, and that is okay. One of the central points of habituation is that you take it at your pace. So just because you might design it week by week, it doesn't mean you have to do that. With habituation, if you go in at the deep end, that's what can sometimes be counterproductive, and that's why we're building up. But if you'd like to go in at the deep end, and there is some rationale for that, then the next module on what's called rejection therapy might be of interest to you. Now, regardless of all of this, don't forget to keep practicing the external focus we looked at with your focus of attention and dropping other safety behaviors. I know this is a lot to keep in mind, and it might be that some weeks you don't have time to plan things, and that's okay. One way to keep this going when you've got a lot on and you're not really planning things formally is to just monitor your behaviors and situations and think, am I engaging in a safety behavior right now? Why am I doing this? And if you can, if you feel up for the challenge, choosing to act differently. And that's a way to keep it going in between your own self-guided work when you're not having time to really plan this formally. So good luck with your exposure.